Good afternoon, folks. Recognize it's 2 o'clock. We're going to give a few minutes for folks to come in and get comfortable in the room. Welcome in, everybody. We're all just getting comfortable here as we join on to the WebEx. All right. I think people will continue to walk into the room, but we'll go ahead and kick it off. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. This is our fourth meeting of the Developing Clean Electricity Generation and Transmission Policy Working Group. Again, my name is Joni Slager, a policy analyst here at the Oregon Department of Energy. I'm joined by a team of ODO staff here on the line. In particular, Jason Searman will be moderating the chat. Ruchi Sadir will be facilitating our discussion. Edith Bear is sharing your screen now. Hugh Arsenault is taking notes. And Jennifer Villanueva is managing our WebEx, which is recording. And Jennifer is also available if you have any technical issues. You can direct message her in the chat. Might be used to Josh, who's helping out on the low carbon fuels policy working group, which is also meeting right now. Next slide, please, Edith. So just a reminder, ODO's mission is to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system, and to advance solutions that shape an equitable clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. Next slide, please. Today we're using WebEx, hopefully familiar with it by now, but all of the members of the policy working group, or many of you, are here. We're excited to have you. You're here as panelists. As panelists, you should see controls at the bottom of your screen to mute or unmute yourself and to turn your camera on or off. You can also raise your hand when you have a question or type it in the chat on the bottom right. We may have some members of the public listen in as attendees. Attendees can't participate in the discussion or chat today, but we have a public comment portal. So if you're here as an attendee, you're welcome to submit as comments. We'd love to hear from you in that venue. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, today we are one of 5 policy working groups. Our focus is electricity generation and storage in front of the meter, transmission, and the associated development needs and barriers or competing priorities with those. And with that, welcome to the room. I'm going to hand to our facilitator, Ruchi.
Thanks, Joni. Next slide, thanks. So I'm just going to work through a few process purpose reminders. Some of these you've seen before, but just as usual, if you have like a question that comes up that would help clarify what we're doing here today, I just want to make sure we're all aligned. So just drop a question in the chat as we're going through this, and we will address them. But first of all, just really appreciative of your time and the thoughtful discussion we've had over the past few meetings of where we are. You know, we've been considering the overlay of Oregon's existing policy landscape. We've been surfacing ideas and providing feedback on the clean electricity generation and transmission priorities and gaps and opportunities and policy actions. You're going to hear this from Joni too. You know, the modeling is directional. There's limitations on what it can tell us, but you are all here because your professional and lived experience in the energy sector makes this policy working group more rich and has all of those considerations that like a machine, a model can't do. So it's really important, and it's just not reflected in the modeling. And so just really glad that you're all here and can bring that type of information to this policy conversation. Next slide, please. This is the working group roster. You've seen this before. We've asked in the past if people can't join a meeting to please let us know and designate an alternate if possible. And we actually do have some alternates today. Really appreciate Tucker Billman from ORECA, who said he was going to be stepping in for Alec Schiebel from UEC, and that Zach Baker, who is now at NWEC, is stepping in for Fred Hewitt. And I think Sarah Buckwalter is here for Jacob at PGE. And if there's other folks here that are an alternate for somebody on this roster, you didn't get a chance to let us know in advance, just let us know in the chat so we can track that. Really appreciate you all. Next slide, please. So, we do have a few alternates and different people in the room. So we're going to do a quick, just sort of in the chat, welcome to you all with introductions. If you could just remind us your name, your affiliation, and then sort of for fun, something that you're looking forward to this May. We'll give you a few minutes to add that to the chat. Oh my gosh, Ryan, I was going to say sunshine, but my 5-year-old daughter is kind of like sunshine, so I added her instead. Yeah,
Oh,
Hannah's
gosh.
really.
5 years?
Yeah, she's turning 5. It's crazy.
Oh man.
I track her age with the pandemic since she was, born in May of 2020. So that's how long the pandemic was too. Long ago. Yeah, warmer days. Looking forward to that too. Oh yeah, those local farmers markets are opening and launching some boats and reservoirs. Oh yes, Mother's Day. I would like to claim that one too. Looking forward to that as well. Rhododendrons, flowers in the garden, and good weather. Zach's going to the East Coast. Well, I don't know. I hear it's humid over there at this time of year, so come back soon. Let's see. First swim of the season. That sounds awesome. Well, thanks everyone for sort of introducing yourself in the chat. You can keep doing that if you haven't had a chance. We just like to know who's in the room and kind of put some, human touch to who is here virtually. So really appreciate you playing along with that. Let's see, next slide, please. Here's a snapshot of our meetings to give you a sense of like where we've been, where we're going, where we are. This is our last breakout meeting and are hoping to have a good discussion today. And so, we also have this May 9th, you're going to hear us call it out a few times. We have this May 9th deadline for written comments. And we have a slide at the very end that has some questions to help you consider what those comments should be focused on. And then after that, on May 21st, there's going to be sort of a big plenary meeting with all the working groups. And the purpose of that is to sort of report back on what all the policy working groups have surfaced and kind of stitch together some of the areas that have some overlap or interrelated areas of discussion. So that will be really interesting. Next slide, please. So you got an email from Joni with some synthesis, and we want to make sure that that is accurate reflection, and want to make sure there's comments on that as well if it's not accurate. And there was some complementary analysis that was shared through a webinar that hopefully many of you were able to attend, where we want to focus on the potential policy actions that have surfaced through this working group that Joni emailed around. And also evaluate those policy actions from the perspective of these different key considerations that are potentially more qualitative in some ways, but really want to hear your perspective on that. So that's what we're hoping to do today. Next slide, please. This is a group agreement slide that we've had in the past. So it's really just kind of helping to share how we hope that this group can interact together. We want to hear everyone's perspective. We want to make sure people are feeling comfortable sharing their perspective. And so we've learned that that is, part of doing that is to listen carefully, try to understand where people are coming from, ask questions, keep an open mind to people who might have a differing opinion or perspective. Try to encourage respectful and candid, constructive conversation. Also wanted to sort of think about speaking time. We really do want to hear feedback. And if you find yourself talking a lot, consider stepping back. If you find yourself being quiet, be brave. Please speak up. We really think your perspective matters. Let's see. I think the next slide here is the agenda for today. So like last time, it's pretty light on presentation, but we are hoping for some good discussion. First, Joni in particular, and I'll help to provide a brief report out on what we're hearing. And then we're going to have some group discussion on the complementary analysis, potential policy actions. We'll take a 10-minute break in the middle, get a snack, do some stretching, and then we'll come back and continue to discuss those policy actions. And then we'll talk about next steps and adjourn. And if you're worried or wondering or really curious, no, we're not using the Miro board today. So sorry to disappoint you if you were looking forward to doing more sticky notes. I'm going to check the chat here to see if any questions have come in. And also welcome folks to sort of raise their hand if there's any clarifying questions before I hand it to Joni.
Hey, Richie, this is Hannah Dondi Kaplan.
Hi there.
Are we discussing the PNNL memo with the policy actions?
Thanks for the question. Not specifically, and I think Joni and others could share more if they're interested. There's if there's something in there you want to elevate, it's not off the table, so feel free to. That was a technical assistance memo. Each of the policy working groups sort of wanted to sort of, have some sort of, information provided to the group. At one point, Odo staff thought that we could do that ourselves, but there certainly wasn't enough time. Joni did have like a sort of existing work stream slide I think she'll show again, but this is a technical assistance that national labs offer to all state PUCs and energy offices. So we're appreciative that they were able to provide the memo. It's not comprehensive, but we hope it's helpful if you're like not as aware about certain policies and things like that. It definitely should not be interpreted as an Odo work product or policy actions that we're considering. The document that you got from Joni is more of the focus of today, but we sort of hope that's more supportive and informational if you had questions about some of those more specific areas of policy that are happening in the state. But yeah, Joni, do you want to add anything to that, or did I cover it?
No, that's great. Thanks, Richie. Yeah, intended to be helpful. Hope that it is. But it's we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. We want to hear your ideas and focus the meeting today on that. But thank you for asking the question, Hannah.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't want to derail us here too much, but I'm just curious, is that going to be included as an official addendum to or attachment to the energy strategy, or it's really just for this group's internal use?
I can start. My understanding is that it's really for this group's internal use, that it's sort of for people who have different levels of information about this. It was sort of a synopsis and of additional information to sort of provide more background information for this conversation. But really our purpose is to focus on the policy action. So I'm not aware of any kind of plan to include it in the final report. But we haven't written the final report, and if others feel like it is helpful to include, I think we'd be open to that too. But its real purpose was to be a service to the policy working group members in the discussion and supporting the discussion.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Hey, Ruchi, this is Tucker with ORCA. Just a quick question. You had mentioned that a better document to be working from is the one that Joni provided to us. Is that the slides that she sent out this morning, or is it one that maybe came before I was added to the list that I'm not familiar with?
It was a list of the potential policy actions, Tucker. So those are also in the slide deck.
Okay, I think I'm familiar.
I will.
If you've got them or could resend them to me, Joni, handy, that would be helpful. I know you're going to be leading discussion here, so that may be tough to do in the short term. But
I
just
think
so I
that
know.
Joni CC'd me on them, and I'm happy to send. I think it was she sent it maybe like Friday or Thursday or something. I can forward that to you, Tucker. No problem.
Thanks, Ruchi. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
This is Andrea. Can you send them to me as well, please?
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else, put it in the chat. I will forward it around again. Thank you. Okay, I think it's over to you, Joni, unless there's any other questions.
Thanks, Ruchi. So let's kick off to the reflections from Odo. Next slide, please. Yep, and the next one after this. So I've got a couple of slides here. Should look familiar for most of you. I've said before, but I'll say it again. The modeling results we got from the energy pathways are not themselves the energy strategy. They gave us a foundation and a direction for our conversations. One direction is that electricity is really a key fuel for Oregon to meet its climate goals. And there are different pathways for how we can expand our system, but in all scenarios, the electricity sector needs to expand significantly. So with that direction on kind of the what of what needs to happen, we're discussing the how. Next slide, please. And these conversations we're going to have today are really important to build on that modeling results. The model, even including the complementary analysis, can't fully capture all of the key considerations. And this is part of why we're here with you. We really want to hear from you, your lived experience, your professional experience on all of these key considerations and ideas that may come up. That's what we're seeking in our discussions, and we welcome that in written comments after today as well. Next slide, please. So when we first met, Odo set a structure for discussion. This is the matrix we've got. We've got some big umbrella headings in that left side. Those are organizing our conversations, but that text might change. Last time we met was our third meeting. We were focused on proposed strategies. Today we're in the fourth column. So we're going to be talking about proposed policy actions. But before we get to that discussion, we've got some draft syntheses of our meetings so far. I emailed those out, but I'll hand to Ruchi to go over them. This is the matrix, but I think as Ruchi will note, once we add text to it, it gets a bit too big for a slide. So over a couple, but and Ruchi.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So this is the structure for the discussions that Joni just mentioned. You know, I think we need to go to slide 16, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry.
That's okay. So this is the synthesis that was shared, and the last two columns, like Joni said, they don't fit. So basically you'll see them on the next slide. And then there's the proposed policy actions that we're really hoping to focus on today. Next slide, please. And then here's where there were some revisions based on the feedback. Thank you, Joni, for putting those in red so we can see them. And so, as we've said, we expect these drafts to continue to change with your feedback and input. So really appreciate that. And, you know, some specific areas where we saw some changes here: consolidated 4 organizational headers into 3. So you can see the row on regional transmission is changed and now consolidated with other topics. And then added language in red to capture more of the nuance from the previous discussions. So include some defined terms from the bill, and have also got the definitions on this slide here for some easy reference. Next slide. So here's the preliminary draft synthesis of the proposed strategies from the meeting so far. This is one of the emails Joni had sent out ahead of time as well to think about, and expect this to change with your feedback and input as well. There's some synthesis here, you know, from all of our meetings, but there's places where there was some information that, you know, we put in here that may have been reflected in comments or in the chat as well. So for instance, didn't hear like a lot about regional collaboration, but this synthesis is intended to sort of reflect everything. And so want to know, did we capture it right? Is it too high level? Did we lose some details along the way that are important? And you don't have to like figure that out right now. You know, we're really hoping to hear those from you by May 9th. That's really, you're going to hear May 9th be repeated a few different times because the team is going to be taking everything in before presenting back to you on May 21st. But are there any reactions you want to share right now? Welcome to put that in the chat or raise your hand or speak up here. Oh, I do see a couple of raised hands. Jennifer, I see you raised hand there. Sorry if I missed you before.
No, that's okay. To me, it seems like we need to step back, that this is really focused on, you know, renewable development, which I understand we're working towards the clean energy future in Oregon, but it just seems like we're missing, you know, the broader topic of generation and transmission, and there's no discussion of hydropower and the BPA system and where does that all fit in. I know that was a key foundation in the modeling. So I guess that's just one preliminary focus, and that I don't see where the reliability and affordability discussion comes in here. So it just seems like those are some missing pieces. I know that they came up in previous discussions, but these, I just think it's such a narrow subset of our broad working group that's supposed to be focused on transmission and generation.
I think that's a really good point that I've actually been thinking about too, because I feel like there's a little bit of terminology here that I got lost on. But I think I have figured it out, but I would welcome Joni and Edith to kind of, or others to sort of jump in. So I think that there's sort of these broad strategies we saw from the modeling. There's some directional pieces, and in that there was a continued reliance, for example, on hydropower. If you remember one of those pie charts with a resource stack, and other sort of clean electricity supply side. And then there's a focus on electrification of some end uses. There's some focus on the development of clean fuels for those hard to electrify areas, and then focus on demand side energy efficiency. So those were sort of these directional pieces. And I think Joni might remember that. And I imagine that in the final report, that will be sort of like a preamble, for lack of a better word. And then there's sort of these recommendations that will be developed that have some information that's like over the next 2 to 4 years that are broader recommendations. But within that, there's these like actual specific policy actions. And that's, I don't know if you can see my hands, but I'm going down to levels. That's I kind of think where I understand this list to live in. So I understand why you're feeling that way. There's sort of that preamble piece that we have said in previous other meetings, but it's kind of this focused area now. But I'd invite Joni or Edith or others to sort of add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Ruchi. It's a really helpful comment, Jennifer. I think my goal in drafting this was to try to capture at a synthesis of our meeting, and we had a 3-hour discussion. This is a little high level, but hearing from you, you know, what you feel is missing is super helpful, so we can draft this right.
Yeah, like for example, I
capture
don't
that.
see any generation sources named other than microgrids, which of course would be a very, very small element of an overall energy strategy for Oregon. So I guess that's just a few preliminary comments. So.
Yeah, I'm hearing the like clean energy resource potential should be expanded upon and be more specific in what it's referring to,
Right,
and
non-fossil
specifically transmission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, That's helpful.
Commissioner Doran, I see your hand as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree 100% with what Jennifer just said. And after the explanation, think I'm even more confused. Reading this synthesis, I heard one person say this is high level and another person say this is the detail without the preamble. So I'm not sure what this is, but I agree on several points. One is the identification of the generating models, because that's been a large part of the discussion, and including the ones that weren't included, the geothermal, the nuclear, and how those fit into the discussion. And I especially bring those back up because listening to Odo during testimony on several different bills, those keep coming up in the discussion from Odo to the legislators. And so I know it's not in the model that we started with, but it has become a kind of a reply and part of the discussion of Odo itself to the legislator. And so we're missing that, and the transmission especially. I guess I just need more and even before Jennifer, when I read these in the slides, I need I guess a better explanation of what this document is and what it does.
Kind of want to let Joni or Edith give it a try to build on what I said.
Yeah, it's I would go back to the beginning of we adopted this matrix to try to help us see how our meetings build on one another and move forward. And we want to help kind of fill it out to provide a synthesis of what we heard. But it's also an opportunity for us to check in of what are we not capturing in the synthesis. I don't think it's needs to be comprehensive, but it's intended to help us capture how these meetings are progressing and the discussions that we're having.
Are we trying to fit this into legislation that's out there now, or are we trying to do this independently?
I can start. I think that the way we've talked about it, Commissioner, is that the energy strategy, the bill that directed Odo to develop it, is going out to 2050. The modeling had assumptions around current policy, so that's a little bit of what you've heard in the past. But we've moved beyond the modeling to look at what kinds of barriers exist, what kind of challenges exist from what those findings were, and what kind of policy actions might be able to address those. So as it relates to current legislation, we've talked about the 2025 session. We're not ignoring it. We know it's happening, but it's very much a different conversation than what we're having in this room. When session ends and we see what passes, and that will probably, affect our draft, but we're not submitting this report to the legislature and the governor with recommendations until the fall. Does that answer your question about legislation, Commissioner Doran?
Yeah, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes. Why Odo created this kind of synopsis, but no in how does it fit in?
Maybe I can jump in just to say this is not the recommendations. The starting point for the discussions 2 meetings ago were kind of the key takeaways from the modeling. And the modeling was really clear on points, Jennifer, that you're bringing up, that hydro is a foundational resource. We have to build a lot more transmission and generation infrastructure. And so this is rolling up some of that conversation, but at a higher level, or kind of maybe the language is a bit general. But I just want to kind of say that's where this is coming from. So we are thinking about all of that, and it's built on that foundation of kind of looking at the whole power system and everything that needs to happen. And then as we discussed, we started to go through, we started to hear, well, how do we make sure that when we build that stuff that needs to get built, that it's built responsibly? And responsible is a pretty broad term. So we talked about land use. We talked about siting. We talked about the need for speed, but also to be thoughtful and to honor the land use protections that we have. And so that's just an example in the first line of sort of where this is coming from. And I think it'll be helpful, Pat, I see your hand up, so maybe we can give the floor to you. And I think it might be helpful, Joni, for you to keep running through, because I know that we're going to get into some of these issues as we move forward. I don't want to get too stuck on this framing. I realize that this framing is maybe not working for some people in the room, which is why I'm kind of bringing it back to like 2 meetings ago where we started with an illustration of sort of how talking about kind of we need to build a lot more resources. We have a lot of load growth. We have clean energy goals. And then how do we do this and what are the barriers? That's what this comes out of. And we could do that for each one of these lines. But I just want to be clear that that's where this is coming from. And it is coming from a broad look at kind of our entire system and what the HB 3630 asks us to do, which is to figure out how we meet our clean energy goals, taking into account the challenges that we're facing right now on reliability, resilience, and cost.
Thanks, Ada. I agree, and I'll call on Pat in a minute, but I guess I will reflect back at a high level. This is unclear and would benefit from more certainty, and I can take that back, and I think we can follow up with email on what comments would be helpful here and what we're hoping to do with this. But we can follow up with that after the meeting, because it's not the focus of today's discussion. But Pat?
Yes, I'd like to bring everyone's attention back to your slide 16, because I think the confusion is not understanding the differences between the issue statements, the proposed strategies, which is what there seems to be confusion about, and then the policy actions that are needed to implement those strategies. And so these issue statements and the proposed strategy statements are fairly broad, and they're using fairly loaded terms that really do need to be unpacked in many ways. But that process happens in the proposed policy actions, which is what we're supposed to be talking about today. So I think it's essential that we understand this distinction between what's an issue statement, what's a proposed strategy, and then what's the policy, whether it's legislation or regulatory action or whatever that's needed to actually implement those strategies. I think it's that straightforward.
Thank you, Pat. Ruchi, I think we've got next up the complementary analysis.
Okay, great. I just want to reiterate that I appreciate the questions, and if it's not landing, we will go back and work on some more clarification. Okay, so there was some complementary analysis that was done in conjunction with or after the modeling. On April 6th, there was a public information session which involved the consultants providing results on air quality and energy wallet analysis, as well as insights into a forthcoming jobs analysis from that. So wanting to just create some space, if you didn't get a chance to tune in, the recording is online, but I know many of you were able to join in, and wanted to just pause and see if there were any specific barriers or policy gaps from the energy wallet analysis that you'd like to share here, especially as it relates to the sort of generation and transmission build out that that we're all focused on today. So just going to pause and see if there's any comments or feedback or thoughts on the complementary analysis. And also maybe remind you that the energy wallet, that was the one that involved identification of 5 sample households in various parts of the state, and assuming sort of different uses and home types. For example, there was sort of one house that was multifamily, another house that was a single family home. One was in a cold climate, some had access to natural gas, some didn't, had various levels of use of cars to understand what their, what they've had at the pump, that sort of thing. So hopefully that jogs your memory. And then the air quality analysis was looking more at sort of COBRA modeling and where you see different health outcomes with air pollution and changes over time. I know that there's some other policy working groups that are diving a lot into this because of the sort of the vehicle side and air quality around highways and things like that, and as well as sort of the buildings focused group talking about sort of heat pumps and various technologies. So I just wanted to, give space to see if there were barriers or policy gaps or ideas that were sparked from that here. Okay, great. I think I see a hand raised over here. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hi. I wasn't able to listen to the energy wallet and jobs analysis piece, but I was scrubbing through the slides here just a minute ago. I'm curious if the jobs analysis would project something that didn't show up in the model. And I'm thinking, since I'm doing the offshore wind roadmap, are we looking at the potential job benefits if those kinds of technologies came through as energy options as a way to balance out what those future decisions might be? I don't know if that makes sense.
It's a really great question. I want to pass it to somebody else for an answer here.
I can start, Ruchi.
Okay, great.
And would welcome others on the team to weigh in here. But I think it's a great question, Jeff. I think all of the complementary analysis start from the energy pathways model is the baseline. So those results are going to be informing the modeling, and it won't be exploring additional scenarios or sensitivities beyond those. So I think the answer is no, but if someone else on the team understands that differently or has more nuance to share there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, Joni, that's all correct. I would just add that the job study is a modeling exercise that builds off of the results of what gets built in the modeling that we conducted, the energy sector modeling. And so it won't reflect jobs for build out that doesn't happen in the modeling. So offshore wind is an example there. I think that when we've talked about offshore wind, we talk about a bit of ambiguity on where it might show up. The driver for the offshore wind and the way that our analysis was structured are California's goals. And I think we've talked with you about there being kind of some of that might end up off of Oregon's coast, and the granularity perhaps isn't deep enough to get to that. I would also say on the emerging technologies, which I would say this is one of them that are kind of coming up farther down the road, that one of the benefits of the energy strategy is that we're going to revisit it over time. And so as we learn more, we'll be able to kind of revisit areas like, I know that there's also been a lot of talk about nuclear. Right now, we can't cite nuclear in Oregon. And so it was also not included in the modeling. I know there's a lot of interest. And so I think there's still potential in those areas, but the way that the way that we're conducting it and building off of the modeling, the offshore wind jobs wouldn't be reflected because it's not getting built in the model.
Yeah, just to add to that. So Jeff, the way that the contract worked, we only are building the jobs analysis off of the reference case. So if a resource showed up in the reference case, you'll see jobs for it. It had to be sequential to the model analysis because it's built off of multipliers that say if you have $1 million worth of investment in a particular resource, it creates this many jobs. And then it goes its next step further. It says, and if you have this many jobs, it gets broken out by these different types of jobs management, administrative, field worker, da, da, da. And so only for those resources that showed up in the reference case. So those resources that were included in the model, like nuclear, like offshore wind, or enhanced geothermal, that either show up really only a tiny bit or not at all because they weren't the most cost-effective resources and the model didn't pick them, then they wouldn't be included in the job analysis.
Okay. I appreciate the answers. If I can just reflect back, having talked with Bureau of Ocean Energy Management last week, they cautioned that maybe we shouldn't be so optimistic that California achieves all of the 25 gigawatts in the time, or that they site it off of their coast, just given where leases are now. And so it challenges some of the baseline expectations of your model, to where if you changed a couple of things, and then also if there was a job benefit to Oregon to locating turbines offshore Oregon that either feed Oregon or California, how do we account for that? And it sounds like the energy strategy in this iteration isn't going to be providing that kind of insight, and maybe we have to look to the future. So thank you.
Thanks for bringing up the job study in that way for offshore wind, Jeff. I also see Jennifer's comment in the chat, where I think, going back to some previous meetings, the way that I remember it is that there are definitely some what we've been calling like long lead time or emerging resources, and SMRs, floating offshore wind, enhanced geothermal, some of the clean gaseous or liquid fuels that have been part of the discussion in some other groups are in that category. So in terms of sort of the next 2 to 4 years, I think that there might be some steps we can take in time in terms of discussion or that roadmap, but yeah, I think that that's kind of a longer term, sort of longer lead time resource that's showing up in the modeling and other discussions. I'm not seeing any other hands. Any other sort of feedback or thoughts on the complementary analysis? So here, seeing some of the comments in the chat around how hard it is to build something, which is one of the issue statements I think that is somewhat reflected in a previous slide, and continued sort of interest in SMRs, which we've been also hearing from some others. Okay, I think that we can move to the next slide, but still want to welcome, thoughts or comments as it relates to the complementary analysis in the comment portal. Okay, I think this is where I pass it back to you, Joni.
Thanks, Ruchi. We can go to the next slide. I've got a couple of slides here that again should look familiar, but I hope are helpful grounding for today's discussion. One thing is that our focus for the energy strategy is looking at the state level policies. We'll expect to have recommendations for the state legislature and maybe the governor's office. And there's a whole lot of non-state level policies that are really relevant to our discussions and provide important context as we think about policy gaps and what the state of Oregon can do. But that is the focus is at that state level. Next slide. And then it's also important to keep in mind kind of the timing here. Our energy strategy is due to the legislature in November of this year, and it seems pretty likely that policy recommendations they might consider taking up would be in the 2027 long legislative session. So our focus today is really looking at kind of near-term priorities, but not items for today right now. And along with that, it's important that we keep in mind all of the existing work that's going on. So we can be trying to look at kind of how the policy landscape might change between now and 2027, 2028, and how are we going to be building onto those existing work efforts. We're not just duplicating the work underway right now. Next slide. Oh, I see a question, Commissioner Don.
Sorry, and I apologize for interrupting. Can you go back one more slide, please? I think this is a great slide. I really think this one, as I went through it, the one thing that you have under count, and the reason this jumped out to me, you have the County Energy Resilient Grant Program, and I don't know if everybody's familiar with it, but it's a small grant that was presented to each county, and counties could go together and anyway, but it was a very kind of small amount of dollars. It really wasn't an efficient amount of dollars. So several counties, including Umatilla County, have created these resilience programs on our own dollar. But what we're finding is that they don't get weaved into the discussion because the resilience grants that Odo put together were really formatted and really programmatic so that you guys could plug answers back in. How do you blend these programs that aren't set up on the same format as Odo, but at least in our opinion, achieve the same or even greater information and targets?
It's a great question. I could start. I'll note first that I picked this as an example because it was when we had this meeting, it was 2 days before the deadline.
Great example.
So it was a timing, but I think I'd welcome others at Odo to weigh in, but I think it's a good example of work going on where the state can provide support, and it's an open question that would be great to hear in our discussions of like what more we can do or what more the state should be doing. So to like trying to recognize that nexus.
Thank you.
Oh, Ruchi, I think you're on mute.
Oh, it has to happen once, right? Well, you're all welcome. I did it. So, Commissioner Doran, what I was trying to say is that I think that type of feedback on that type of program, that's an example of a policy action, right? It's an existing program that had some amount of funding. It was able to do certain things in it, and if that's the type of policy action that the state could further that has some sort of benefit, those are the details I think that we're really eager to hear about in this meeting, as well as by that May 9th comment portal. So thank you for raising that.
All right. I don't see other hands up, so I think Edith, if we can move to, I think it's 25. And there is in the slide deck that active work stream slide from a while ago, but want to share a couple of slides here, and we shared these with our advisory group if you were following that, but I thought it might be helpful to share a little more information on how we envision the final report might be structured with kind of varying levels of recommendations, each one adding more specificity and specific action than the last. So this slide is focused at that kind of highest level, what strategies the state might pursue. And these are largely delineated by the topic areas that made up our 5 working groups. And they're directional and kind of tell us which direction the state needs to go. So at this level, strategy of clean electricity. It doesn't set a quantitative target or define a specific pace or scale. This isn't a plan, it's a strategy to help guide state action. So that is the highest level. And if we go to the next slide, please. You see those strategies at the top, and then the middle level is what we might call policy recommendations. Those are still high level. And under those will be the policy actions. And we're going to talk about some potential policy actions today. That is our focus. It's the policy actions are where we hope to get really actionable and measurable and specific. And to fall into, I think we've talked about the 3 different buckets a policy action might fall into. Kind of a new policy or program we need, a revision or expansion to an existing policy or program, or an area that needs further data or study, but all things that are kind of near-term priorities. John, I see your question in the chat. That's the draft text right now. I think clean electricity a little distinct from low carbon fuels, which is another group that's been meeting and discussing. We did get feedback back from our advisory group when we met with them last week, but I hope that framing is helpful before we kind of dive into the policy actions. To emphasize the focus today is really to get into those specifics. I think, Ruchi, I hand back to you.
Great, thank you. So I think we're on slide 27, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, there we go. So we have a couple hours here actually for discussion, and recognizing that we might not get through everything today. You're going to hear this like a broken record. This May 9th period. It's not a comment on everything, but it's really on like the fact that there's a lot of content here, and we want to surface all that information on policy actions, whether it's the details that are missing or something that should be tweaked or an idea that's not been surfaced at all yet. So we have 10 potential policy actions based on what has been heard so far in this group, and wanted to sort of dig into that discussion. There's items in here that would really just benefit from your feedback and more information. And I'm going to explain the process, and then I'm going to actually hand it back to Joni to walk through each of these. And we're going to take the clarifying questions on the policy actions themselves as Joni is going through the slides. And then we're going to do sort of like a poll to figure out where to dig in more. So I'm going to explain that more in a bit. But just in essence, we want to hear from you and know if these 10 policy actions that have been drafted up make sense to focus on our time on today, or if you have other ideas that you want to share. And based on that, we're going to allocate time to have discussion. So that's how we're hoping to run the meeting. So next slide here. There's basically like a poll if you've ever used Menti before, menti.com. It's a fist to 5 exercise. So it's not voting, it's just trying to get a sense of where the best time would be used for discussion. So it's not on the substance per se of like voting on it. I want to be clear about that. It's more about helping us understand, based on who's in the policy working group here today, where it would make the most useful time in discussing verbally more. So the numbering system here is a fist to 0, 5 is, your open hand. That's where the little moniker comes from. And 0 basically means, this idea does not work for me at all. We should really discuss it. The number 1 would be, I see some major issues with this idea and we should discuss and want to talk about those major issues. 2 would be, I see some minor issues with this idea and it would be helpful to discuss those. In previous policy working group meetings this morning, that has also been like, I don't understand what this term means. It's, I want to get into the details of what it, so the word issue might feel loaded, but that's what minor means there. 3 is, I see minor issues, but I could just address that in written comments more easily. It's not, a discussion type of item and easier to maybe write out or put into detail that way. 4 is, I don't have any concerns that I want to discuss about this particular policy action. And then 5 is, I just like it as drafted. So for purpose of allocating our meeting time, we're going to prioritize the discussion on the items that receive 1 or more of like a 0, 1, or 2. And then as we go through these, please think about what number you're going to want to assign and like what is maybe more of a clarifying question versus something that's like, hey, I want to get into discussion with people about that. It's totally anonymous. So, it's going to be on this other website and we're just going to try to see like, hey, there's this many people on the policy working group on the call today. Like, have they all kind of clicked around on a number? But if you pick a 0, 1, or 2, we're really wanting to hear that, hear that stuff. So just think about that when you're choosing your number. Don't make me give you too much awkward silence while I wait for you to speak up about sort of what those issues are that you wanted to talk about. You can think about it in terms of like, hey, this idea doesn't work. It just could not be implemented. It makes sense, but the text really needs to be revised to have more detail. And we want to talk about that, or like in concept, I get it, but, really needs more specificity and we need to figure out what these terms mean. So today is that day to get into those details and specifics. Maybe another one to think about is, what do you think makes sense in this 2 to 4 year period for the state to focus on in terms of a policy action? And then again, we'll also have a question that just generally asks, are there other policy actions that aren't on this list that you want to discuss? Okay, so I'm going to pause here before I hand it back to Joni to actually walk through each of them and take any clarifying questions. Does this structure of how we're trying to figure out what to talk about, focus our discussion time on, make sense? Are there any questions about it? Oh, I think I see Jennifer's question here in the chat. Is everything in scope for policy actions, assuming that it is in alignment with the legislation? I think by the legislation, you mean the energy strategy bill directing ODO to do this work. Is that right, Jennifer? Yes. Okay, she said yes. Joni, how do you want to answer that one? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So this is, we're going to go through some items to tee up those things we thought might make sense to be on the agenda for today. But part of the Menti poll will include yes, I have other stuff I want to talk about. If you have something else that is within scope for this working group, is generation transmission, that is in scope. So please put it in the Menti poll when we get there.
Any other questions? You can raise your hand or put in the chat about how we're trying to use our time wisely for discussion. Okay, I'm not seeing any, Joni. Okay, so again, I'm passing it to Joni to walk through everything, and then you're going to see that same language again on the Menti poll when you pick an option for a number. Okay, go ahead, Joni.
Thanks. Next slide, please. All right. So these are roughly grouped by the headings we gave them earlier, but I'm going to go through each kind of in the category and then pause for clarifying questions. Really excited to get into the discussion with you, so I might go through this a little fast, but if you have something you have a question on that you need the answer for you to be able to respond in that Menti poll, let us know. Next slide, please. So the first item we shared was establish a new state entity to at minimum engage in statewide transmission planning, establish designated transmission corridors, and lead regional engagement efforts on transmission, all with the responsibility to explicitly utilize an environmental justice and energy justice lens and equitable processes through meaningful community engagement to prioritize environmental justice in impacted communities. And sorry, before I move, there is a code for Menti, but we will share that when we get there. This is a topic we might want to dig in more. I've got on the slide kind of some of the sticky notes, some examples of the sticky notes we've heard in this group, some we've heard in other groups, and wanted to tee this up as something we might dig into. I'm not going to talk through all of the sticky notes. We've got quite a few across the slides, but I hope they elevate kind of some of the barriers that we heard relating to transmission and particularly concerns about concern of lack of coordination at the state level. So that was a theme we heard, that transmission maybe would benefit from more active state involvement in coordination and planning. And we've also heard both in this group and in another desire to kind of elevate meaningful community engagement. So that's the first potential agenda item we could discuss today. Next slide, please. The second item is study barriers to project development, particularly barriers affecting projects that do not quickly proceed to construction following siting and permitting approvals. And I want to first acknowledge the sticky notes here. These are copied out of the Miro whiteboards again from our past meetings and from other groups. We've heard a lot in this group and in others about concerns around siting and permitting, both on wishing things that the processes were faster and from wishing the processes kind of slowed down and were more inclusive and had better engagement. And those things are a bit in tension. I'm going to jump to the next slide. So it's also on this item. But I want to expectation that we will acknowledge that discussion, that there's views on both sides there. And we also want to be cognizant here on the number of ongoing work streams relating to siting and permitting. The conversation we're having isn't happening in a vacuum. But kind of where that leaves us is that we've heard barriers that are in tension with one another. And I haven't heard very specific targeted ideas for this. So if you have some, would love to hear those in the Menti poll. Hope to just get into those later. But one thing that came up as we were thinking and reflecting on this, and that I have not seen talked about very much in other venues, is the number of projects that go through siting and permitting and go through that community engagement, but then don't move very quickly into construction. On this slide, I have data specifically from the Energy Facility Siting Council. It's a project update issued this month with 2.7 gigawatts of solar projects that were approved but not built, including some that went through and got approval back in 2020, some that have had to go back to FSEC to ask for an extension of time for permission to start construction on other site certificates. So this is would be a study into kind of these projects and also non-FSEC jurisdictional projects, why they're not moving in construction sooner after these processes. And recognize that, yes, over the past couple of months, we've talked a lot about the different barriers to development, and there are a lot. But I wanted to elevate this question, this potential study, as something this group might have input on or ideas about. We have a really clear need to expand the system, but if there's process efficiency and kind of public engagement fatigue concerns, it seems like there might be benefit from better understanding these barriers and how they follow on or perhaps intersect with siting and permitting processes. So that is item number 2 that we might discuss. One more item. Next slide, please.
I have a clarifying question on that.
Sure. Go back.
I was just trying to figure out what are we talking about if it's not siting and permitting, aren't those kind of outside the realm of public policy? Wouldn't those be on the developer side of a project? And what is the state role? I just having a hard time wrapping my head around what are the barriers from a state policy perspective that we would be addressing beyond the permitting and siting aspects. If you could give examples, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah. So I think for
I can give an example if you want me to, Joni.
Oh, sure, Commissioner, go ahead.
Yeah, the Nolan Hills project, I think it's about 650 megawatts. It's a split between solar and wind. Has made it through FSEC, actually one of probably the longest FSEC processes ever. Made it all the way through. Now has not started construction. One goes back to Jennifer, what you mentioned earlier, and that's transmission. But number 2 is a power sale. Several of these projects just don't have power sold. Anyway, that one just jumped up as an example right off the bat. But I don't know what I agree with you. I don't know what government policy helps solve that, especially the power purchase agreements.
Thanks, Commissioner. I think that's a great example, and I think Jennifer, your question elevates its. I don't want to presuppose a study would find that there's need for state action, but it's something
it's just
we wanted
something to identify as an issue.
It could potentially be, yes. So there might be things that the state has control over. I know there's a lot of active work at the PUC on dockets specific to the investor-owned utilities, so I don't know if there might be something that could be uncovered there where it would benefit from more conversation and kind of connecting the dots. But
okay, yeah, I'm not a renewable developer expert, so I really didn't know what we were talking about. So I appreciate the example.
Yeah, and I'd welcome like other policy working group members to sort of chime in the chat too. Diane, I know Renewable Northwest has got a lot of thinking on this and others, but I think you're right. There's some, market forces, maybe another way to say that, Jennifer. But there's sort of like cost of capital, there's financing, there's just different parts of the development cycle, and permitting and siting is one of those. And I think the table that Joni is showing, which is I think been shared in other places too, is sort of just putting forward the the piece of the puzzle that is siting and permitting that the government does have a big role in is not the only piece. That there's sort of influence in different ways. When a permitting process and they all kind of they affect each other. So like to me, it's like if the siting and permitting process takes a long time, your balance sheet changes over that time.
Right.
Maybe that loan that you got is not at the same rate anymore that you assumed. And so anyway, there's some interplay there that the state may have some ways to sort of smooth out or change. And I think that's where it helps to understand.
Now that you have me thinking, is like supply chain, repeal of federal incentives, tariff policy. There are other things that are starting to gel. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the question.
Next slide. So third item we might discuss, also relating to siting and permitting, and we've got the same sticky notes here as the prior one, kind of reflecting that. But again, we've heard concern about kind of where to site facilities and that need to protect naturally sourced communities. So this is an idea we heard about creating a renewable energy designation and land use inventory that maybe could allow the state to create some criteria to evaluate lands and allocate resources to the energy transition. This could be an inventory of urban areas, rural industrial zoned areas, other specific areas with existing active or inactive industrial uses, both for renewable energy or low carbon facilities. This is an idea that is also part of the low carbon fuels policy working group. So they're meeting now, and like us, going to be having a Menti poll. So this is something they might want to dig into, but we wanted to share it here as related to the discussion we've heard.
Joni, I did see John's hand go up before, and it might have been on the previous slide, but just want to, he might have something to say here as well. John, did you want to?
Oh, I don't want to hold us up, Ruchi. I was just going to say, I like the idea of, from the previous slide, you kind of understanding why some of these projects may not go to development. And I have an expectation of what we hear back. But I guess for me, it kind of fall into the category of just knowing more. There's this universe of things. Whatever you're doing, there's a universe of things, some of which you can control and some of which you can't control. And understanding which is which can really be helpful. So I'll just leave it. That's just all I was gonna mention.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. So those are the three potential agenda items for our first category on facilitating in-state development. But are there any other clarifying questions you need answered before we'll get to the Menti poll on this, and you'll have a space if there's other stuff there you want to talk about, but I'll pause for a second.
So far, not seeing any raised hands or questions in the chat on this one.
All right. I'm gonna move fast. I want to get to that Menti poll and get your feedback. Next slide, please. So we've got a couple items here under the category promoting resilience for local communities. First is continue and as practicable, expand statewide energy and energy resilience funding opportunities, including making a funding opportunity for creating a formalized community benefits plan that provides meaningful engagement in the process for environmental justice communities. We've got some sticky notes here on the need for community-led initiatives and the need for funding to support those. Something we've heard in our prior meeting. So broadly recognizing the kind of ongoing need and provide space if there's a desire to kind of discuss this more today. And then the next slide is to investigate and direct investor-owned utilities to implement microgrid tariffs. Our discussions previously have kind of elevated concerns around some regulatory uncertainty about microgrid development and how projects might struggle to move forward due to those. So a tariff or maybe a schedule could kind of outline what a utility's process is and clearly lay out the information required, point of contact, and kind of steps to have that discussion. for developing a project. I wouldn't envision a tariff would mean this is a utility service offering, that they would be necessarily funding the work. But it seems like having this could provide some of that structure to clarify the process. So those are the two potential agenda items in this category. Any clarifying questions on either of those? Hearing none, I'm going to move on. Next slide, please.
Any yeah, no hands or no comments. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks. So again, we've got I think two in this category on regional collaboration. First is continue and as practicable, increase collaboration with neighboring states and regional entities. Our focus is state level, as we discussed, but it's really clear Oregon won't achieve its energy policy objectives in a vacuum. We're part of a regional good. We've acknowledged in prior meetings a lot of ongoing work streams at the regional level. As Richie mentioned this, we've heard this is hard. We didn't discuss this too much in our last meeting, but hoping this might tee up what recommendations there might be for state engagement on the regional level. That is a potential agenda item. And the next slide. Got a study potential for shared risk development models to secure large-scale investments, including long lead time resources and emerging generation storage technologies. Something we heard in the prior group is that there's a lack of a structure for making shared investments can be a barrier to development. And so we do historically see some projects like transmission lines that move forward through partnership agreements, utility to utility. But this is really, I think, a question about, is there a way for the state to support future large-scale investments? And is there a need for state support, public-private partnerships or not? As we mentioned earlier, hydropower, solar, and wind are established technologies likely to be the backbone of the clean energy future. But as we look farther out in the modeling, we did see a need for additional resource diversity and support. This is a potential study we could discuss to kind of better explore what the state's role could be there. I think those are the two in this category. Any clarifying questions on
Joni,
either?
I did see two hands come up. One was Sarah, and then one is Commissioner Doran. I don't know if Sarah's is still up, but we can start with Commissioner Doran. Go ahead.
First of all, Dan is just fine, thank you. My question is actually on the previous proposal. One of the things that I don't see in here that was part of this discussion is that the real barriers that regional transmission and regional wheeling of power, real ones that have prevented this process and this type of regional transmission in the past. But I don't see any sticky notes addressing the barriers, just the need to move forward. And I think that's kind of Pollyannish to just think you're going to do a regional transmission by the stroke of a pen.
I want to just second that if I could really quickly, just in that I think, thank you, Commissioner Duran. I think we need more clarity around what this means, what practicably increasing collaboration with neighboring states actually means, what that looks like in real policy conversations. Is that implementing similar policy concepts to what those states have implemented as far as cap and trade, for example, or is it related to regional market decisions around like SPP, Markets Plus, that sort of thing? I didn't really fully understand what the end goal is for any of this sort of collaboration. And so I don't know, Dan, if that's kind of what you're saying, but I think it's kind of similar just in that there's not a lot of clarity in what the specifics are here.
Yeah, and I guess I wasn't looking for as much clarity because I don't think there is any clarity on this particular subject. But I agree with you that the list of barriers, I'm not saying that they're all not insurmountable, but the list is incredibly long. And I think, again, and it's a bad term, but I think to run into this proposal Pollyanishly without some very, very realistic, intentional discussion on barriers is kind of fighting against the wind at a very steep speed.
Thank you both for that. I know we have other hands up. I'm just going to say I'm hearing there's a need for some Menti poll votes, 0, 1, or 2. I would love more details. Where do you think the state should dig in here? What specifics should be had here? I think this is in part trying to elevate kind of the breadth of topics we could dig in on today, and also try to make that clear. Welcome comments for anything we can't get to, but I would love to have that conversation and hear what you think it would make sense for the state to be collaborating on.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like, Tucker, that's why you're here. So glad you're here, and so glad that Commissioner Doran is here, because I think those are the details that this could help to, especially in the next 2 to 4 years. That's the other thing, is like what could be helpful in the next 2 to 4 years. Sarah, can I go to you next?
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, a lot of what I'm thinking has already been covered here. I think the details will really matter on pretty much all of these straw proposal items. But I did want to raise something that I've noticed as we're going through. There are a couple times when I'm like, oh gosh, as an IOU, we're required to do this at the federal level. And so I'm wondering where that feedback would be most helpful for Odo here. I'm just, again, I'm so sorry. It could just be me, but it's not clear to me if like this straw proposal item number 6, for example, is this, is the goal here to turn this into a policy action item, or is this a recommendation, or is this a strategy? Because I'm just wondering how detailed we plan to get here. And, perhaps I'm just reading this wrong, but it's like, we need details. So are we trying to develop an action, or is this a recommended action? I'm just struggling to understand. So sorry.
Yeah. I'll start first, but
Joni, I'm sorry, Joni, can I jump in here?
Go ahead, Pat.
Because I think the context continues to be missed, that we already had a full workshop on the barriers, and that now we've gone from taking those barriers and thinking about them to developing a strategy. It doesn't say that this is not difficult. So we've got this strategy proposal, and that's all it is. It's a strategy proposal. Do we want to try to find ways to increase collaboration with our neighboring states and regional entities? I think absolutely we have to do that. Now, what we're going to talk about in detail today is how do we do that? It is hard. There's all these competing market forces, but yet we've got to figure out a way to make some headway in that area, because collectively we all benefit from that. So again, I think let's keep in mind, we talked about the barriers. We have strategies now. We need to put some meat on the bone. We need to talk about proposals policies to actually try to implement these strategies. And so again, I think that context continues to get lost.
I appreciate that, Pat. I really do. The problem is that if you don't identify at this stage, and I know that we've gone through these in all these different working groups, but as we look at these proposals, those barriers have definitely got to be part of the strategy, or all we're doing is saying, hey, we have a clean path. And if I don't think that's what we're saying at all.
This is helpful. I mean, I would just try to say that this is probably a reason to choose an option to discuss this later, and we can dig into it more, because I think there are several points here. Like, this is very broadly worded. So Sarah, I hear you on like, what does this mean in terms of like FERC or the state, or and I also sort of think it doesn't make sense to do everything with everyone in the next 2 to 4 years. So I think we're asking for your lived in professional experience. There's been a lot of talk about regional collaboration over the past, I don't even know. I guess I've been working in Oregon for 15 years maybe, but much longer than that even. So from your experience, how can you make this more actionable in the next 2 to 4 years? What are those specific steps that the state could help either take through like authority that it has, or maybe help to influence? I think that we're open to that discussion, but I know that we're trying to do clarifying questions here, so you know how to sort of pick a option. But to me, this, even just this conversation, makes me think that it's probably good to dig into it more. Joni, would you want to add anything to that, or does that help with the clarifying questions on this one?
That's right, Ruchi. I would say I would love to dig into all of these, but I want your input on how we set the agenda for our discussion and make sure we're addressing kind of what the group wants to focus in on. You might want to submit comments on all of these, and that's part of the elevating kind of the full breadth of, and you know, we might be missing some, but trying to propose kind of a range of items to help underscore that. Would love more details in all of these places, but.
Joni, I'm sorry to jump. I can't raise my hand, so I'm just going to jump in because if I can just add one more perspective to this very briefly. I think what we're really looking for here is that more, as Ruchi said, it's kind of that more specific, actionable item that we could consider. And I think that including what barrier you think that addresses is a completely helpful and valid part of the discussion. So, you know, these are kind of, this is a starting point of policy ideas, and what we're looking for is for you to help us get them to be more specific, to identify what you see would be that thing that would be most valuable in the next 2 to 4 years. So I just wanted to add that we're not pushing barriers to the side. We had a meeting to talk about them, and today we can elaborate further, but we're really trying to get at that like meat on the bone, as Pat said.
Oh, good. Thanks, Sarah. Joni, how many more do we have? We have 4 more, right? Okay. Let's try to get through some of the clarifying pieces here then for those ones too.
Just the last category, I think. Next slide. I think we covered number 7. So yeah, the next slide after this. Kind of the last bucket is cross-cutting ideas. So move to the next slide. Item number 8. Integrate electricity and natural gas resource planning to support the timely and orderly shift to electricity and clean fuels that prioritizes an equitable transition to explicitly include environmental justice communities. This is another item that's come up. We discussed it a little bit in this group. It's also come up in other groups. So concerns with current planning tends to be just for the electricity system or just for the gas system. Heard concerns that investments might be different if the planning occurred differently. So that is something we might discuss more today if you want. And then on the next slide, this is something we haven't discussed much, but I wanted to elevate it as kind of within scope if the group wants to dig into it, is extend. Sorry, am I losing camera? Hopefully you can all hear me.
Camera, but we can still hear you.
Okay, not sure what's going on. And so we've talked a little bit about new large loads like data centers. You might recall in our modeling key findings document, one of them was that there might be a need for more policy action beyond House Bill 2021, which only applies to Portland General, PacifiCorp, and the state's electricity service suppliers. It doesn't apply to Idaho Power or any consumer-owned utility. And I want to acknowledge the vast majority of consumer-owned utilities get most, if not all, of their power from Bonneville Power, so they have extremely low emissions profiles. But especially in the next 5 years, we're expecting a lot of new tech load to come onto the system. If I can jump to the next slide for a minute. This is a graph our modeling consultant shared, and that big purple is the tech loads. Just wanted to, just a reminder, this is in the near term the single biggest driver of electricity load growth in our modeling, and in the need for additional electricity infrastructure. Okay, we can jump back for a minute. And so this was, I think if you're familiar with Bonneville Power Administration's new large single load policy, you know, there's restrictions in federal law for how Bonneville can serve new loads over 10 average megawatts. So there's some uncertainty here. Kind of I have some text as a reminder from our key model findings document, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna skip over that. Kind of the upshot was that for our modeling, it reached beyond House Bill 2021 to achieve our economy-wide targets in Executive Order 2004. And it's uncertain whether that will happen without additional policy support or direction. So again, that is not something we've discussed very much to date, but it might be something the group wants to dig into. And then we've got our last item, number 10. Next slide, please. Which is investigate and implement performance-based rate making for investor-owned utilities. We've heard barriers related to incentives that current rate making creates for investor-owned utilities. A number of stickies were flagged that way. Performance-based rate making is a different approach. It can change what incentives are. It can create penalties. It also generally includes just a large number of reporting metrics without necessarily having an incentive or disincentive. I believe the PUC actually already has a large number of those. So this is something we heard. We haven't dug into it very much. I don't have more specifics, but again, it might be helpful for this group to talk about that more if that's an item of interest. But those are our 10 items. Got one more slide maybe before we pause for clarifying questions. Really want to acknowledge that this is not by any means an exhaustive summary of everything we've heard. Just thought it would be a helpful way to share potential agenda items for today's discussion. We've got some examples of the other sticky notes, and of course the sticky notes are captured in our notes online for our prior meetings. So I hope this is helpful.
Joni, we do have a hand up.
Thank you.
Jennifer. Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just, and I have touched on this earlier, and I apologize if I missed it. How are we talking about, like, I noticed some of the things on here have been discussed and debated in the legislature and rejected. Are we trying to ask the legislature to revisit that, or how are we thinking about that?
Yeah, I can start with that, Jennifer. It's a question that comes up a lot, and I think it's just awkward timing, honestly, you know? So we're having these policy discussions in this virtual room and several virtual rooms at the same time. We know there's a legislative conversation happening in a different building that we're not currently at. The legislative session is talking about some policy ideas that you also see here. We see that, we understand that. We're not focused on the current legislative session, though. This report is going to be filed with the legislature and the governor in the fall of 2025 to potentially inform the 26 or 27 session. I think that you and I have been around long enough that there's bills that die and come back in different forms and ghosts and things like that. So perhaps some of the bills that you see now might come back, whether or not they're in this policy conversation or not. But we are going to take a look, the team is, as to what ended up passing or not passing in the 25 session as sort of a filter or lens on what you see here. So that we'll try to at least reconcile that part. But it's not intended to be like a direct, you know, evaluation of the 25 legislative session. It will be taken as an input of, you know, what passed or what didn't.
I would recommend not limiting yourself to the 25 sessions. Some of these have come up in sessions in recent years too that didn't pass. I think if I'm understanding Jennifer correctly, there's certainly some that have come in 23, 24 timeframe too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tucker, totally. That's the ghost I was just talking about. But I think that, you know, the question is well taken. It is kind of awkward and confusing. There are policy items in here that we've heard surface through the policy working groups at the same time as people are advocating in the legislature. So we hear that. And our plan is to just continue to remain focused on the fact that this is intended to inform future sessions. And that's informative, but that's, you know, current session is not the end all be all on what you see here. But Joni or Edith, would you like to add to that at all?
Does that help, Jennifer? I thought Ruchi, that covered it for me, but
I think so, yeah. So I guess we're not limiting ourselves is what you're saying.
Right,
Yeah.
Jennifer, that, you know, as you well know, being a veteran of the legislature, some ideas come back fail, and then all of a sudden, poof, they pass. Then maybe they need some tweaking or something like that, or the timing's not right, or the makeup of the legislature changes. So
Right.
wouldn't be
Well,
constrained
you
with
know,
things
one
that
of the
fail.
things that caught my attention that I guess I don't see it here as one of your 10 strategies, but like in the PNNL document, there was discussion about, well, the RPS in this state is done this way, and the cap and trade was adopted in Washington. And I was like, well, we've already talked about that and discussed that. So I see some of those things aren't coming back again in this format, but so anyways, that's why I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, if that is a policy action that folks want to suggest in this forum, this is the place to surface the ideas. So I don't know if Jennifer, you were saying I'm going to suggest cap and trade in the Menti pool, but I do want to say that you shouldn't feel limited at this point, because this is sort of the policy working group is sort of surfacing the ideas there. But I think we're eager to sort of get to the discussion and see how people are feeling after sort of understanding these and seeing if there's other ones too. Any other clarifying questions? Otherwise, I'm going to suggest we go to the Menti poll. Are we at that stage yet, Joni?
Yeah, I think so. The next few slides had these all together, and then were the Menti instructions, which you saw. But
okay. Do you want to maybe put up the Menti instructions one last time, and then we just go to the Menti poll, we do the Menti, we see what we get, we go to a break and just come back to the discussion? Is that like a fair, we're kind of revising the agenda a little bit, Joni, I guess, but time-wise?
Edith, I think slide 48, I think, if you have that.
Okay, so you saw this earlier before Joni walked through. So this is just a reminder of how to pick an option here. Hopefully you'll see the same, so you'll see the same language that Joni walked through, and then you'll see some bar charts. So the numbering here, and then like the little statement will show in the Menti poll too. So we can just go over there now, I think, unless there's any questions on this slide. I see Lauren has a question. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yes, I just want to clarify one more time. So this is just to discuss. We're not like voting on like ideas that we like all of these could potentially go forward. We're just voting on whether we have things to discuss about them.
Yes, that's exactly right. We've already asked you all to be here for like a 5 hour, I don't even know how long this meeting is, 4 hour meeting. So we know we have limited time, and we also want to continue to emphasize that we need your feedback on all of these. And we have a comment portal that we really, really want to focus you all on these policy actions and written comment as well. So we're just trying to figure out which ones we want to spend our 1.5 hours that we have left together to like talk about. Thanks for asking that question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of this more along the lines of clarifying.
So should we put the Menti code in? So people will see in the chat here, we really want this to be focused on the policy working groups, putting in their selections. And there's a code here too. If you're having issues, please let us know. We can, in one of the previous ones, we had to email the code. People were not seeing it in the chat or able to copy it or something. So let us know if that's happening to you. And you can see the first one is already up. And at the bottom, it tells us how many of the policy working group members have made a selection. This is anonymous. We're just trying to see if we want to give people enough time to sort of make a selection here, though. Okay, I see 12 people. That's probably about half of you. So let's give you about 20 more seconds here to make a selection. Okay, thanks. I think that was about 20 seconds. So let's go to the next one. Hi, Jennifer. No, it's anonymous. I saw your comment in the chat there. Okay. Study barriers to project development, particularly barriers affecting projects that do not quickly proceed to construction following siting and permitting approvals. Really eager to get to the discussion, so I'm like literally putting a 1-minute timer in for you all. Okay, I see 10 people so far have I'm going to give you another 10 seconds here on this one. I will say, Jennifer, though, you know, it is anonymous, but if people are putting 0, 1, we're really going to want to give you all awkward silence until someone speaks up, because that's what we're going to prioritize in sort of having a discussion. So we won't be able to know who that is. So we're kind of banking on you to, if you're putting a 0 or 1, to be willing to sort of talk about it here.
Or 2.
Yeah, or 2. Sorry. Yeah, that's true. Okay, I think that's it for this one. So next one here. Conduct a statewide land use inventory, update the current land use classification, and establish a database of land suitable for various types of renewable energy and low carbon fuel development projects. Okay, I see 12 people. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. Thanks for getting in those numbers. Okay, continue and as practicable, expand statewide energy and energy resilience funding opportunities, including a funding opportunity for creating a formalized community benefits plan that provides meaningful engagement in the process for environmental justice communities. Okay, I see 8 people so far here. I'm gonna give you about 10 more seconds here to get your number in. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Okay, investigate and direct investor-owned utilities to implement microgrid tariffs. Okay, I see about 12 people so far. I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds here. Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to the next one. Continue as practicable, increased collaboration with neighboring states and regional entities. See 4. Okay, I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds here. 14 in so far. Okay, great. Thank you. Can go to the next one. Study potential for shared risk development models to secure large-scale investments, including long lead time resources and emerging generation and storage technologies. Okay, 3 people so far here. I'll give you a little bit more time. Okay, I see 12 people so far. I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds here. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next one. Integrate electricity and natural gas resource planning to support the timely and orderly shift to electricity and clean fuels that prioritizes an equitable transition to explicitly include environmental justice communities. Okay, I see 14 people so far. I'm gonna give you 10 more seconds here if you haven't picked a number yet. Okay, great, thank you. We can go to the next one. Extend HB 2021 clean energy requirements to new large loads. Okay, I see 14 people so far. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds here. Okay. We can go to the next one. Investigate and implement performance-based rate making for investor-owned utilities. Okay, I see 13 people so far. I'm going to give folks another 10 seconds here. Okay, well, thank you for that one. Next one, please. Okay, here we go. Is there a policy action you would like to introduce and discuss with the group? I actually don't know how people are supposed to use this one, Joni. Are they supposed to just say yes or no, or?
It should be a short answer option.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry, new to Menti, but that was the intention. If that's not
are people seeing the area to type something in?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Wonderful.
Okay, we're going to give you more than a minute on this one. Responses are hidden right now from here, but I can see how many I think are coming in. Well, I see some responses to this one trickling in. This is also the time where we were going to go to break for 10 minutes and then come back and see where people were putting their numbers and try to prioritize where we have our discussion. So you're welcome to sort of continue to add policy actions in here, and we'll see you back here at 3:55. Okay, it's well, it's 3:56. Well, almost 3:55. Could you let us know if you're back from the break, please? You can turn your camera on, you can put something in the chat.
Raised hand works. Thank you.
Raised hand works too. Thumbs up. Thank you. Hope everybody had a chance to get some water, get a snack. I want Ryan Perry to know that I ate my children's Tillamook cheese snacks again. Okay. We got a lot of great input from the Menti poll, and while you all were snacking and I had my cheese, Odo staff took a look and are suggesting to start with the transmission entity. Joni, do you want to talk through that a little bit more?
Yeah. Maybe Edith, if you want to bring this slide up. I believe this was number 50, but a lot of people were.
I'll just say that in what we saw so far doesn't mean that that's the end all be all. We're just trying to focus on the ones that people wanted to discuss the most, right? So we saw interest in transmission. We saw the statewide land use, regional collaboration, HB 2021. We also want to make sure we end with just a straight up round robin. So I'm going to try to hold the discussion to 4:40, and then we can just go around and see if there's sort of closing questions or thoughts before we just go into sort of the written comment. So that's what we're going to try to do with the next hour. And so going with the transmission one first, go ahead. Thanks, Joni. Sorry, I didn't I guess finish my intro before handing it to you.
No. Well, this is the time to hear from you. I think we got a 0, a lot of 1s on this. 2. We'd like to start first with what do you all want to share?
So I can jump in on some of this, Joni and Ruchi, if that's fine with you all. I think others will probably speak to it. But in the interest of time, because I'm gonna have to hop off early, I will start it. This was one of my bigger concerns. We had concerns with this concept when it was a legislative concept being considered at House Energy this session. Glad to see it died. One of my messages there was at a broad level, and then I'll talk more specifically about how I think we can see something like this maybe potentially work. But one of the things you hear being in the utility industry about transmission is that the challenge, especially when you talk to engineers and operations experts and people that are actually building power lines, people that are actually developing transmission lines, they talk about two things that I hear frequently. The first is that the process is pretty bureaucratic. We have an overly bureaucratic permitting process at the state, local, and federal levels. The bureaucratic process has slowed down our ability to actually develop and build transmission lines. That bureaucracy is put on display, I think, with Boardman to Hemingway, but it's not the only place you see it. It's not just with transmission infrastructure, it's with generation infrastructure as well. Although as co-ops, we're obviously doing less of the generation piece, and we're more reliant on the transmission piece. But it's very challenging for me to see us kind of exploring the idea of adding yet another bureaucratic agency or entity that's at the state level to try and solve what many see as a bureaucracy issue. I think, if anything, to be effective here, I think a better approach is to start looking at what we can take out of the mix, what bureaucratic processes we can be thinning down and reducing. The other thing that you hear frequently from folks is sort of the duplicative processes that involve multiple state and or federal agencies, counties, local governments, etc., that sort of force the process to a halt. And one of the big concerns I have about creating yet another agency, and this is how I felt with the Transmission Authority as a legislative concept, is the fact that utilities are already struggling to kind of navigate the process as it sits, especially if you're not a large utility. And as it is today, there's multiple state agencies that are often involved, sometimes federal agencies, and there's county level processes. I don't think we need to add another agency to that myriad list of them that has its own authorities and has its own sort of piece of this pie. I think that would slow the process and potentially make it more challenging. If you were to make something like that work, and I haven't given this a ton of thought, I thought about it enough in the context of the bill that we have before us this session. I think that you would need to ensure that it has really heavy input and guidance from electric utilities. I think it needs to be supplemental to the work that electric utilities are doing, supportive of the existing work. and not something that gets in the way of that or replaces that. And I think it would need to be a hyper-focused role or a hyper-focused scope on reducing the burdens of the current permitting processes, facilitating the various authorities from the different agencies at least at the state level, potentially at the local level. And I think that those would be two places for it to start, really learning what utilities need and then trying to bust through the processes that we struggle with ourselves. So those are sort of my two. Really, that's a lot I know to dive into in one piece, but as I said, I'm kind of limited on time here. So I wanted to get my thoughts out there for the record. I'll shut up now and see what others have to say.
No, thank you for
Tucker,
jumping
can I
in
ask
and
you-
joining us, Tucker.
Can
Sorry,
I ask
Alan,
you a
go ahead.
question, Tucker. What do you mean by bureaucratic process? Because, like, for instance, B2H took a really long time, but the actual approval process was relatively short. It was the public involvement, it was the going back and forth between the developers, putting it in, installing it, asking for extensions. What do you mean by bureaucratic process?
Sure. No, it's a really good question, Alan. And from again, this is my understanding. I'm not the person sort of in, day to day in this mess. I wish I had that person here to speak to this for you, an operations or engineering expert. But it is various agency processes. It could be archaeological pieces of this. It's permitting processes that, of course, require reviews. Some of that's at the federal level. Some of that takes place at the state level. It's various agencies that have involvement in this, whether it's I think it is DLCD that our folks work through with some of this, but it's also certainly FSEC has a role to play in this. There's county level processes. We have when I talk to Alex Schiebel, he's actually somebody that speaks to this better than I do because Umatilla is building a lot of transmission. He talks about how certain processes can't happen until others have already taken place. On for example, your CPCN processes. And so there is a lot of nuance to that, as I understand it. That's what's shared with me. There may be others on this call that can speak to it better than I can. But that process is one that is timely or that takes a lot of time. It's time consuming and creates its own sort of challenges. But I'm certainly not the expert on that. And I could find more information on it for you, Alan, to give you a better, more specific answer.
I think that Tucker, having more specifics would be great if there's capacity to provide that in written form. I think that would be really helpful. I also see a few other hands, Diane and then Jennifer and then Pat. I also wanted to remind folks, this is discussion to sort of help surface what issues there are with this and also think about if there's like a different way to facilitate responsible development of electricity infrastructure in Oregon. That going back to sort of the modeling suggests we need a lot of infrastructure development. We see that being a potential barrier over the past meetings. And so thank you for that. So I'm going to go to, let's see, I said Diane and then Jennifer and then Pat.
Thanks, Richie. I think Renewable Northwest would absolutely support a transmission authority, which is, or some entity. I said transmission authority because we were one of the main authors of the bill this session that was mentioned. And I just want to clarify that the intent of the bill was actually exactly what Tucker was saying he could see value in. It was not meant to add more bureaucracy. It was meant to help streamline, especially because of the difficulties that he flagged that the utilities have in their planning. And I think what the challenge that we have seen is we have the BPA system planning and then we have utility planning, and there really isn't a place to integrate those things. And so you have a lot of great work already happening at the state level among the utilities, at BPA, even at the regional planning bodies. And so the vision, at least for the planning piece of this particular entity, would be to pull that all together and to synthesize it in a way that identifies what are the priority projects that this entity needs to dig in on to make sure that we have the reliability and we're meeting targets, et cetera. I think I also had a question on the way this was written. I wasn't sure exactly how to interpret that last piece with a responsibility to explicitly utilize an environmental justice and energy justice lens and equitable processes through meaningful engagement, prioritize environmental justice in impacted communities. I guess I would just want to ensure, I'm not saying that that's not important, that should absolutely be part of it, but if we're going to start listing the characteristics or things that it needs to focus on, I would like to include more things in there like reliability, safety and security, and those sorts of things. So I just wanted to, it could just be an editing piece, but I just wanted to flag that. And happy to answer any follow-up questions on transmission authority, a vision for that, just because we do see it as a very valuable tool given how bifurcated our transmission system and planning is in the region. And that in itself is, as Tucker mentioned, is part of the bureaucracy and the barrier to having projects enacted, is the lack of that cohesion.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to go to Jennifer, then Pat, then Dan, then Andrea.
I had this thought when I was reading the PNNL background on it, is that I don't really feel like the case has been made that this is what the state should be doing as a policy matter. And so I really don't think that there's anything in either that or that I heard during the legislative session when the bill was brought forward, that why it would be in the state's interest to step in and assume risk when utilities and private developers are unwilling or unable to do so. It's just shifting the risk to the state and the taxpayers. And I guess it may not be designed that way, but if you don't have any details and you're just talking generically about a state transmission authority, we can't support that without any meat on the bones about what it is and how it would work. So, I mean, I think that is really lacking in this bullet point, and we cannot support it at all. You know, there was a lot of discussion in the legislature about concerns about the eminent domain authority, which of course runs counter to many of the concerns of the environmental justice and equity lens issues. So, I mean, the details greatly matter, and I think it would be irresponsible to put such a broad bullet point forward as part of the state policy without significant fleshing out of how it would work.
Yes, I see it quite differently in the sense that this would be a catalyst. This would not be a bureaucracy, but this would be an agency that would have ability to incur bonds and to be a catalyst, to work with the utilities, to work with BPA, to scout out and to be a catalyst to say, look, we can bring some investment. Don't you think this is a good idea? This is a catalyst. It's worked tremendously in New Mexico. There are examples out there where this is extremely beneficial to the state. And I think this is something we really do need to consider.
Thanks, Pat. I'll just also say, like, the details do matter. And I think that if there are some specifics that could be added or changed or other ideas to facilitate responsible development of electricity, you know, the comment about streamlining and things like that, I think that would be really helpful to see in written comment as well. I'm going to go to Dan and then Andrea.
Thank you. First of all, I would totally be against the RTO bill that the way it's presented. It just makes no sense. And what really kind of, and this comes from the personal seat that I sit in, is we've had 4 people discuss this proposal, this straw proposal, and not one person mentioned landowners or local governments. The two critical pivot points for any of this, and the way the legislation's written, the way this is written, is just a walkover of local government. RTOs have worked. Everything from RTOs to deregulation have both worked at both ends of the spectrum, and they've also been extremely big wrecks across this country. So I think just saying RTO is a savior is really a huge misnomer, and then being simplified to this level is even more of a misjustice to all the work that this committee and several other committees have put in. I can't get there with this type of discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I'm going to go to Andrea in a second, but I do want to just say that, you know, Jennifer asked this question earlier, and it's hard because we struggle with it too. We know that there are bills that talk about this, but we're trying not to talk about the bills if that is helpful in any way. There is a policy concept that's under the bill, I suppose, that we even went as far as not saying RTO or transmission authority using the names in bills, but you know, as an entity, and like look at what is here, and the details that are focused on is engaging in statewide planning, transmission corridors, leading regional engagement, and having this responsibility to have meaningful community engagement and process. So if there's specific details here too that you think that, you know, maybe from the learnings from the bill, but again, this is not the bill itself, you know, I think that that's helpful to flag as an issue and see if there's other ways to do this. But I don't want this to feel like you need to sort of say that you're for or against a bill that this language is reminding you of, because this will be something that we're trying to put forward for November after this session. And then another kind of clarification, I know a new state entity could refer to a lot of different things. And so wanted to distinguish the idea of a regional transmission organization, which would sort of have control over the bulk transmission system. And this transmission authority was a different concept that had more of this kind of planning and financing and
I agree with Richard, but this explicitly says and lead regional engagement. So it calls it out in this straw proposal.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, part of your point there in terms of like what does that mean is, I think, helpful detail as well. Andrea, I know you've been pretty patient here with your hand raised. Would you like to go next? I saw your hand.
I can't hear Andrea. Is she muted?
Oh,
Yeah, now we can hear you.
okay,
There we go.
sorry. This is where I get torn between my history as an energy planner and my role with the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts, right? Because as an energy planner, I'm like, oh, yes, this would be so great and make things fast. But it also raises a lot of red flags, similar to what Dan was saying, but in a different way, because, you know, if you build it, they will come, right? So when we're looking at the things that this entity would need to consider, one of them is the impact on our high value farmland, because that's the greatest place to put energy transmission through. It's the greatest place to site solar, but it's not where we want to site solar, right? It's the easiest. I didn't say it's the greatest, it's the easiest, right? Least obstructions, you could go nice flat, all that stuff. But we need to protect that land. So it's what concerns me is an entity that wouldn't be considering the local input, landowner input into where transmission should go, because it's not just the transmission, it's then the utility scale solar that's going to want to site near the transmission, right? So you're starting, it needs a broader picture of where siting is appropriate before it goes and does its stuff.
This is really helpful. Richie, I think we got
Oh yeah, go ahead,
I
John.
see John's hand. Yeah. Go ahead, Richie.
John, did you want to weigh in?
Oh, I just want to say I've been really appreciating hearing these points of view. They're hard to disagree with any of them, right? And so kind of what I'm hearing is if it's done right, it could be really really helpful. If it's done wrong, it'd be really terrible. But I guess I wanted to point out, I'm looking at the heading, and you know, the term responsible development really resonates with me. And I mean that that's a pretty holistic term, right? So what I think that should mean is that we're accounting for all the things that we're accounting for and not sacrificing consideration of those important things, not being redundant, not being overly bureaucratic, but, making sure that the things that we value are in fact being thought of in the right way. If responsible development means make it faster, that's something else. I get that, right? And the ability to site and develop and deliver transmission projects in a way that's significantly quicker and with a significant more level of certainty. There are going to have to be some hard choices made that sting some people. And I'm not advocating I don't want to make those choices, but I think that's the deal. If we do everything that we want to do and protect everything we want to protect and think about things that we want to think about, then that takes work. That takes some work. And I think Jeff had some good comments in the chat if you guys hadn't seen those. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Jeff, for putting that in the chat. We're capturing that as well.
I just might note the PNNL memo that was provided that discusses the different states that have done it. There were two very different approaches and models. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, that unless you have a particular proposal that you're putting forward, I wouldn't do it at all, because it's going to just raise too many red flags for people. I think you need to put the meat on the bones.
Maybe
I agree, Jennifer. I think the original bill, if I remember right, had between like 15 and 25 pages, depending on what iteration it was. There's a lot of detail that goes into standing something like this up, and without having hashed those out with a fine-tooth comb, I'm skeptical of it as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's helpful, even to say, like, if there were specific questions that should be addressed before this new entity was created or studied to be created, or however you would phrase it, what those are would be really helpful to the staff, I think. So, it sounds like there's some maybe summaries you might already have based on the recent legislative conversation. And, if that's applicable here, I think our staff would love to hear that. I'd love to get to the next one, though. This has been helpful, but I also just want to say, I think the staff would really appreciate any more comments on this one and others by the May 9th date. Am I missing any hands up here? Sorry, I should have checked before I said we should move on. No, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Okay, Joni, do you want to move to the next one here?
Yeah, can we move 2 slides actually, Ida? We got also a number of votes on this one, on a statewide land use inventory. So same question. We asked you to vote zeros, ones, or twos. What feedback do you have? What ideas? What would work better?
See, Rory has a hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I voted this one as needing further discussion, and I actually support a lot of it. But that second phrase, update the current land classification, that raises some flags for me and, my knowledge of the state land use system. There's important state laws that require certain lands, a lot of rural lands, to be zoned in certain ways for farm use, for forest use. So just, that phrasing, updating the current land classification, raises a lot of questions and could lead to some, I don't know, a lot of opposition if it's left that bluntly, I suppose. But, I'll also note, while I, in my day job, the organization I work for, Central Oregon Land Watch, we're strong land use advocates and try to uphold the state land use system. We're also very practical about the need for energy siting. And, the other points mentioned here, the statewide land use inventory, database of land suitable for various renewable energy and development projects, we'd support that, sort of knowing that we got to site these facilities somewhere. And, John has his hand up. He's been leading the Eastern Oregon energy facility siting rulemaking, and those are questions that he and that RAC have been dealing with. So there's a lot of groundwork for how we answer that question of identifying the low conflict areas for energy project siting.
Thanks, Rory. I'm going to go to John, then Kelly, then Jennifer, then Andrea.
You know, I'm happy to yield to Kelly and someone else. I've already had a little bit of time to talk.
Okay, John, I'm going to put you at the end of the list. Kelly, go ahead.
Oh, I was hoping you were going to say what I was thinking, John, and then I wouldn't have to talk. I have some questions about this language, I think, and I did submit written comments. It's just vague enough to be, I think, potentially kind of dangerous. The state's already invested like a significant amount in updating the land use inventory through the ERISA project, really in an effort to provide mapping to developers as well as jurisdictions, describing sort of some of the various considerations we have for existing land use. So I don't know exactly what that means. It seems like it could potentially be duplicative. And John, that's why I was hoping you were going to comment, because you ran herd on that ERISA project. I have similar concerns to Rory about the language about updating the current land classification. Again, I don't know what that meant to whoever wrote it, or that, to me, it sort of hints at changing zones, which I think is incredibly problematic for lots of reasons. And again, I think the database of land suitable is sort of what the ERISA project was trying to get at. So I'm just concerned that we're not addressing some of the real land use planning issues, which are, from my perspective as an implementer, existing conflicts between ODO's rules, like the Energy Facility Siting Council's rules, and the statewide land use planning rules. And that's really where the rub happens in a lot of permitting actions. And we spin our wheels a lot trying to, in the mix, resolve those issues. So I think a better investment would be to really scrutinize existing rules, identify conflicts, and work on a path to streamline that, similar to what John has been involved in pretty heavily with the Eastern Oregon solar siting standard rulemaking. So just reiterate again, I think this language is just vague enough to be really, really dangerous and pose some significant threats to not only local government, but I think potentially a lot of the work that the state has already done.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm really glad that ERISA lives on. Yay, John. I also worked on that. It was a big effort, and I think that there was even talk about doing more after it, and I'm not sure how much of that was possible. I'm seeing some specific questioning about current land use classification updating. John, I feel like I'm going to come to you with what that means to you after we go to Andrea first. So letting you know, I'm going to get your help on helping us know what that means. Go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, so as a member of that RAC, and having been through trying to come up with an inventory of suitable lands, and John did a yeoman's effort at trying to help us do that, I'm really opposed to this, because the phrase that's raising my hackles here is land suitable for various types of renewable energy and low carbon fuel development. And who is making those calls? Because there are so many competing issues. You've got wildlife, you've got ag, you've got communities, you've got local government. This can be really dangerous. And honestly, the amount of time and effort that would need to go into doing this, we're better off addressing the things that will actually get projects on the ground. So when you look at the grand scheme of things, utopian, yes, this would be great to have. Actually trying to get it, it's not worth the effort.
Mhm. Andrea, if you have time to provide written comments on what will actually get projects on the ground, I think we would love to hear it as well.
Yeah.
Because you're right, that would also be
Right.
under this heading, right? Facilitate responsible development of electricity infrastructure in Oregon. So yeah,
Yeah,
would love to
and
hear more.
yeah, and I mean, it's even some of the other proposals that we're talking about, right? Putting more effort into those.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to John and then try to get us to the next one because we're going to do a round robin at 4:40. So all of you who are being quiet, just know that we're going to ask for you to say something before we make you leave.
Yeah, I'll be quick, Richie. Thank you.
Well,
And
you have to
there's
tell
a
us what
number.
land classification means and all the things, but I'm kidding. Go ahead.
There's a number of people here that have been really instrumental in the LCDC solar rulemaking in Eastern Oregon. I appreciate every single one of you. I promise. Yeah, I think I feel the same way. I think this could be really exciting if we're talking about looking at areas that maybe otherwise be overlooked. If we're talking, and I'm thinking brownfields, I'm thinking rooftops, I'm thinking underutilized built environment type things, built or semi-built environment type things. And yeah, I mean, what update the current land classification? What does that mean to me? I automatically think someone's talking about rezoning land. I mean, it doesn't say that, but that's that's as a planner, we're inclined to go to the worst possible outcome. And so that's what that would mean, is that we could be looking at rezoning land or reclassifying the zoning of land for certain things, possibly without consideration of the other values that may be present there. I don't think that's what anybody be talking about, but some people could read it that way, and that could be tough. That could make my blood pressure go way up. Thank you.
Thanks, John. There's a couple of good questions in the chat about highlighting trade-offs in the report, and Jennifer followed up, and I just wanted to point to the response that Edith provided, which is that the staff is planning to draft it to include details like the barriers that a given recommendation is addressing, how it fits with existing policies or frameworks that we have in place, and risks, and what we would expect to achieve. So I think I wanted to make sure people saw that. Okay, I wanted to move us to the next one, Joni.
Yeah, I think we had the next most serious 1s and 2s on item 6, which I think was regarding regional collaboration. I think that's a few slides on. Yep.
Joni, am I on the right one, or is it the next one?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, trying to interpret the Menti polls, but hands up. I see Zach.
Thanks, Joni. Hey, everyone. Zach Baker here. I had flagged this as one for discussion just because I had some concerns about the discussion about it earlier in the meeting. I think it's a really important recommendation, and Joni, as you mentioned, Oregon is already part of a regional grid, and there are already a lot of ongoing areas of collaboration. So it was hard to tell from the conversation earlier if there was concern about the recommendation in general, or it just needed more specificity. So I just wanted to lift it up with a vote of support. And maybe towards the specificity side, there is already a lot going on. For example, with transmission, there are a number of regional venues that are discussing that. The CREPC, Committee on Regional Electric Power Cooperation, Northern Grid, and there's actually a specific direction for state engagement from FERC orders. And so again, an important recommendation for the states to be able to have engagement in these regional venues. Resource adequacy is another space where there are regional venues, and then BPA as well. So just lifting this up as an important recommendation, and also saying that a lot of this engagement happens with state agencies being involved. And so part of this recommendation could potentially be to just, make sure that there's adequate staffing and funding for the state agencies to be able to participate in the regional venues, and would be happy to work on specifics with folks to help flesh out the recommendation if needed. Thanks.
That'd be great. Thank you, Zach. Ruchi, did you see who had their hand up front next?
Yeah, I saw Jennifer, then Dan, then Patty.
I thought this was extremely vague and very concerning because of the vagueness. And I didn't know if you were talking, I know the state PUC and Department of Environmental Quality, PUC governor have recently weighed in on the day-ahead market decision. And I know BPA is, getting ready to make a decision in that realm. And I don't know what is that talking about this? And if so, I think you need to talk about it directly and, note probably the BPA will have a decision before this policy comes out. So if you are planning to talk about it, I think you just need to be direct. Or are you talking about cap and trade and just going to the points that Tucker was making, I think, at the beginning of the call? And I just, without more detail, this is troublesome. I mean, we can't just say unilaterally that we should be doing this without knowing what we're talking about.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, sorry. There, Dan and then Patty.
Thanks, Richie. I agree with all of the previous comments. There are many groups that are all over this, including the Western Governors Association and their subcommittees that are working on this. I actually see this as a subset of the conversation we just had on the other slide. As I know it's not focused on transmission, but when you start talking about efficient resource sharing, you've just brought transmission into it. And are we duplicating the same items as we did on the previous slide? And if we're going to really look at specifics, can we combine those into one straw proposal and make more sense out of it than two different ones? I think both of those together, again, everyone from John and his team and all the way to the Western Governors Association, all of the different associations and the different planning groups, Renewable Northwest and others that have all tackled this or are tackling this. I'm not sure that this should be a standalone straw proposal on its own. I would like to see a lot meatier final product than just something that says foster regional collaboration. That's just my thoughts, but I'd hate to see us duplicate a kind of a contentious issue over and over and over, knowing that there's a lot of people trying to solve it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for saying that. I think that some of the, well, two thoughts I want to say before going to Patty real quick, which is the some of this might feel a little vague almost because there's a desire from the staff to hear feedback and constructive feedback on details. So Dan, the idea of combining it or sort of putting a few of the concepts together into a different way, I think would be very welcome. I also wanted to sort of on the vagueness, which I think that was, you know, we've been kind of saying a lot. Maybe this is just like an advertisement for please do written comments with details. There's a little bit here where I think it might be helpful to just say like the way that our system is interconnected, you know, if there was an area for there to be engagement, what would it be? Like, where would there be helpful regional engagement as to not? You know, there's a lot of different forums. I think Zach outlined a lot of those. You know, state agencies can't participate in all of them. Are there particular ones where there is greater benefit and it would be, you know, increased collaboration would help to sort of foster these efficient resource sharing issues? And another kind of, you know, the types of topics I think that come up with regional collaboration are, you know, there's been a lot of collaboration on the question of data centers and how increasing load should be treated, and emerging resources that have a potential for regional procurement. I think these larger offshore wind, for example, in the future, there's some concepts where it only makes sense if it's, you know, the power goes regionally. It's such a large resource. And then transmission itself, you know, crossing state lines and different service areas. So I know that it's written in a way that's kind of vague, but I think that is to help solicit some constructive feedback and more information through written comments or right now in the chat. Or so I just wanted to say that as a way to just hopefully take what you see on the screen and help us to sort of turn it into something that's more useful, or to say that it should be combined or, you know, not used at all. I think that's all very helpful. Patty, I'd love to go to you next.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. You know, I guess I'm fourth or fifth in line here, and as folks were talking, I thought, yep, was going to say that, was going to say that, was going to say that. And even you, Richie, I think already answered a question that I had, which is about what would be useful here in terms of getting to a more detailed space where we can have some more productive reactions, I think. But I think that's what we're all noticing, is that, gosh, when it comes to these huge problems, the devil is really in the details, and really what separates non-starters from truly good policy and actionable policy, I think. So, and I understand the challenge that Odo is facing here. So as far as to the end of helping be useful in this process, I heard Zach highlight some of the things I was going to highlight. Was actually, you know, there is a federal mandate that recognizes the gap in regional collaboration with FERC Order 1920. And when it comes to transmission planning in particular, we have a required state engagement process, you know, that involves specific state entities under the CREP-CTC. And, you know, we have various, you know, agencies engaging in other regional studies and planning efforts that Zach listed a couple of them. There are others. Would it be helpful, given that we're trying to get to policy outcomes, would it be helpful to kind of offer like a list of what those are from our perspective, or where we are endeavoring to increase regional collaboration? I heard folks bring up the organized markets topic. I wasn't actually even thinking of that, but gosh, that's a great example too. And there are many topics and forums under which I think these same entities are getting together to tackle these big problems. So as far as getting to the outcomes we're looking for, which is refining what a proposed policy action would be, I guess, how can we do that in a way that also highlights existing work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, I've been thinking about that too, Patty, in terms of like what a policy action that's actually actionable in the next 2 to 4 years could look like. And I keep going to like all of the work that's already happening. And are there adjustments there? Or are there things to build on or to remove, as Tucker was suggesting earlier. Maybe there's some efficiency in how we're exploring some of these items that, but I think that's a really good way to think about it. And if you did have a list like that, that would help us better understand what folks think the priority is, because there is a lot of work happening here. Is it, you know, are all of those places where increased collaboration would be helpful in getting to this sort of heading? Well, we've reached a time where we wanted to do a roundtable and really just close our discussion, knowing that we had way more things we could have talked about. Hopefully this provided you with a sense of where we are on these policy actions and what they mean and where you're hearing feedback, and where we would again love to have written comment by May 9th. We have a final slide that has a few questions on it to help you focus what those comments are as well. So without getting people to be surprised, I'm going to focus first on the ones that I haven't heard from at all. So just to know that you're on deck, I think that haven't heard from Sydney or Shannon, Ryan, Lauren, maybe Justin, and I know we have a lot of state agency partners here too. Haven't heard from them. So I'm just going to start with Justin because I can see his face. And then the prompt I would love to give you is, you know, we asked in the Menti poll if you had other policy ideas that you wanted to share. You could talk about that. You could also talk about some reflections that you have on some of the priorities maybe for you, or you know, what your real sort of interest in, maybe what we expect to maybe hear from you in written comment. Give us a preview of that. So those are some options of what you might be able to share with us in the roundtable. So I'm going to go to Justin, and then on deck, I'm going to flag Ryan Perry. So go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I didn't have any additional policy suggestions. I mean, I think the conversation was great and super educational, as we did a little bit of a deeper dive into however many it was that we got to, the 3 or the 4. You know, from the city, you know, our perspective here in the city of Hillsborough, I mean, I certainly appreciated the conversation around the RTO regional authority. Lots of pros and cons there. I mean, we've experienced that there is, I think, opportunity for our city to be more proactive about helping specifically transmission corridors come into our city, where, I mean, certainly we're one of those fast growing data load centers within the state. But we have a very little transparency into what's coming down the pipe on transmission planning. And it does at times feel a little bit ad hoc in terms of what BPA may be doing, or PGE. So, you know, as a municipality, we would certainly appreciate, you know, a system where we had a little bit more foresight to see what the transmission needs may be in our city and the surrounding land. Because a lot of times there's opportunities for us to account for it in our comprehensive planning or other things that we're doing, even transportation planning. We can start to accommodate for transmission corridors in conjunction with that. So that's something that'll be, I think, in the written commentary a little bit. I certainly echo the comments that we've heard throughout the discussion around the need for the policy actions to maybe list their intent, what the goal and intent is behind it. I think will help us all to understand what they're driving at. And then also in the written comment, a little bit of clarity, like in one of the additional policy actions, you know, I think it said investigate or direct a particular action. And I think those are very different. Those are very different actions. Is it to investigate or is it to direct? So I think we've already touched on that. I think in principle throughout the conversation this afternoon is the devil being in the details and really starting to refine those definitions a bit. So that's was my main 2 cents to add, but not being nearly as expert in this field of work as most of the panel here is, I certainly appreciate the conversation, and I've learned a lot today. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin. I know that we have folks from the utilities here. I know there's a lot of planning processes, and I I actually have trouble following them all too. So if there's any secret hints that we can put into the strategy, I think I would love those, or more than that too. So more coordination or collaboration. Okay, I'm gonna go to Ryan, and then after that, Shannon Souza.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add to it either, to tell you the truth. I much like Justin did not actually have anything additional to add during the comments at the end. I'd like to echo a handful of things he said as well. It's very interesting having such a diverse cross section of representation ultimately in here. You know, a lot of the meetings I sit in on, it's just a lot of utility folks, you know, and so I hear a lot from BPA and transmission and planning and stuff like that. Highly informational, a lot to download from what was here. If I have one other thing, you know, I will definitely throw in my 2 cents on some of the written comments. So from the transmission piece, I don't have much more to add. I think the generation piece on my side seemed to be not what I expected in here ultimately, you know, as far as that goes. I understand the need for the reduction, obviously, in the emissions, native Oregonian. I love how beautiful and green it is here. But I think one of the things that seems to be missing, and it was brought up a little bit earlier on when we were doing the collaboration board, it seemed to be based solely on renewables and realistically storage. And I'm not sure where, maybe I missed this in the discussion, is there wasn't a lot of opportunity for like firm load capacity, which is from a utility perspective and meeting load and at low cost is the big Achilles for us right now, you know, is that base load. Ultimately, the intermittents aren't going to get us there. And if there's some pretty good papers out there about the costs of some of those intermittent things, even with the power plants coming up, if you remove subsidies from those, they're not greatly cost effective all the time. You know, I mean, yes, from a carbon perspective, awesome, you know, so that piece is something I missed there. But other than that, you know, I'd just like to kind of tag on and say thank you for a handful of people's comments. And that's why I didn't comment previously, was because between Dan, Jennifer, Tucker, I feel like that captured pretty much my sentiments on the majority of this very accurately. So I just didn't feel the need to make a redundant comment there. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. On the question that you had on the resource stack, I might have one of my colleagues who can respond in the chat a little bit about the question around firm resources and sort of the, I don't remember either, otherwise I'd answer it, but I think that there were some assumptions in the modeling exercise that went into the sort of findings that we might be able to pull out for you. But I would just also welcome like some of those details that were missing that kind of you don't want to repeat, but you have thoughts on what those details should be, would really welcome that in written comment. I'm going to go to Shannon and then Sydney.
Hi, Richie and everyone. Thank you. I'm on the road, so I'm not going to turn my camera on. I'm not driving. But I really am taking all of this in, and what I'm hearing is that we've got a great opportunity, each of us, that and to go back to those that we represent, or if we already know the answers, to look at each of these policy topics and qualify that. Yes, they are vague, and I think that Odo wants to hear from us what aspects of that concept do we believe would be valuable, specifically, like this is something that we would support, or what would be like a veto? No, absolutely, we don't want it to do that. So to set those side rails for this policy discussions, we can start to frame some of those details up, understanding where, kind of like an event diagram, there is alignment on a recognition of what would be valuable about an RTO, what would be what could be harmful, and what should we avoid. And the same with respect to what's already being done. Of course, over the summer, we're going to have to take some inventory on the outcome of our state legislation. Everything's moving federally, as we all know. Who knows what will happen this summer with Congress? So another part of that, though, is us providing Odo with some of that inventory. Hey, we know that there's already this cross-state collaboration going on, or we believe there's a gap specifically right here in this little area and think that this would be really helpful. So I'm just appreciating the conversation. Lots of big topics, of course, the devil's in the details. And I think that we have a golden opportunity for all of us to really start to kind of map out what and identify, use Odo to filter through all of this input that we're providing to start to map out something that looks like a common denominator for a genuine need with broad support. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Can't wait to see all your details in the comments. Appreciate that. Sydney and then Lauren. Sydney, are you still there? Okay, I'm gonna circle Sydney and come back to Lauren. Do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. Hi everyone, Lauren Link with the Nature Conservancy. So first I'll say I feel like I was really in like learning mode. I did not have much of a chance to look at the proposals. I was looking at John. I was finalizing my solar rack comments, but you know, I did resonate a lot both on kind of the land use proposal piece and the regional collaboration proposal. In particular, I really echo, I think, you know, Kelly, I think it was Kelly's comments around the crux of the issue being the existing, you know, FSEC rules and the land use planning rules, and really kind of wanting to dig a bit more into that. And then the regional collaboration proposal, I agree with looking at existing policies and forums where this is happening, but I guess I would ask to go a bit further. So if there are, you know, mandates to require state collaboration and collaboration with state agencies, you know, how is this currently happening, and you know, what are the hangups there? Like, if this is already required, why are we not making progress, I guess, is what I would kind of want to look a little bit more at. But I echo some of the other comments around just, you know, needing to dig in a bit more and bring it back to other folks at my organization, and we'll be happy to provide more in written comments. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Lauren. I'm going to check if Sydney is back. If you wanted to come off mute, and maybe I'll put Sydney at the end just in case. I'm going to go to Rory and then Zach. Rory, are you still there? Perhaps not. Okay, Zach, are you still there?
Thanks, Ruchi. Just checking to make sure I was the only Zach on here because I know I spoke earlier.
But only once. You only spoke once. So we need to hear more.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess just the one reflection I would have is just the tension between specifics and generality of the recommendations, and then also the duration of those recommendations. How long do they cover? Because we've talked a lot about some existing things, but one can imagine in the future that there may be other regional venues for collaboration, or there may be other topics that need to also have some policy solutions under the umbrella of these policy ideas that are being put out. And so thinking about how to incorporate both the existing challenges that we may have that these policy recommendations are trying to address, but also building in enough flexibility for them to cover things that may occur in the future as things are evolving so quickly and rapidly.
Thanks, Zach. I'm looking forward to your comments too. I'm going to go to, I don't know if Sarah from PG is still on. And then after that, Patty. But I also wanted to make sure, Ryan, you saw, I made a call into the ether. Can someone from staff please respond to Ryan's question? And you have something from Edith there on the model showed least cost mix of hydro, existing and new variable renewable resources, existing gas, batteries covering most of the near-term needs, and then higher capacity factor resources coming on around 2040, which we've talked about as sort of those long lead time, I think, emerging ones. And so that need was also identified, but further out into the future. And Edith is going to, I think, or somebody's going to paste a link to the model findings where some of that's highlighted in a little bit more detail. But thanks for surfacing that that point, and would love more comments on that as well. I'm not seeing Sarah, so Patty, do you want to go next? And then after that, Kelly.
Sure. You know, I don't really have much more to add. Most of my responses were kind of a neutral, or we can respond in writing sort of thing. I guess one challenge, I come to this meeting from a transmission policy perspective. Some of the other items are a little outside my scope of expertise, but I know we may have some feedback. And then also, I just wanted to clarify, it sounds like the process is that we will convene again in late May, the 21st. And then I just want to clarify that there'll be additional opportunity to comment on like the full, like once all of the committees get back together, I imagine there will be a list of proposals, and we will also have an opportunity to comment then. Is that right?
That's right. Yes. And I think that Joni typically does like a follow-up email, all the policy leads do. And so you'll probably expect some more detailed reminders on those deadlines and things like that on Friday.
Great.
But thanks for.
I think that might be, the most effective way for us to engage in writing there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Patty. I'm going to go to Kelly and then Pat and then Jennifer, if you're still there.
I don't have anything else to add today. Thanks so much.
And Kelly, I heard that you already put comments in, so you're just like getting an A+ right here. Thank you for knowing that we were going to say, please submit comments, and you already did it. But we would welcome more based on what you heard here today as well. Pat, are you still on? Would you like to share any reflections?
No, I found the discussion very interesting. I think that, again, I think everyone should take an approach of how would we implement such a, the action? What are the details that are needed? How would we go about this? What limitations do we want to put on it? And so again, I think Odo is looking for how can this be done? What would be the right way to do it? I think that should be our focus as opposed to, well, it's just too vague. Okay, I think they want us to give us those specifics.
Yes. Thank you, Pat. I'm hoping that you give us some specifics in the comment portal as well. Jennifer, and then I know we have a lot of state agency partners, so I just want to make sure you wanted to come off mute and provide a reflection. Then we have one last slide that has one last reminder. So Jennifer, go ahead.
Kind of big ideas, but I did put in the thoughts that I think we need to be looking at natural gas as a transitional resource or a bridge fuel. I don't feel like we discuss reliability. We're more focused on the clean energy side of things and how to get that clean energy built, which is of course very important, but we need to also be thinking about reliability for peaking resource needs and so forth. So I think that's something to consider. And I know we have certain prohibitions, but it might be worth mentioning that, because this is a strategy that for the state to revisit a few things. And then of course the state's position on breaching the lower Snake River dams, certainly that was not considered in the modeling, and so the status quo is what's being considered. So I think we need to highlight that, and that this relies on that as a foundational resource. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. I know we have some partners, GLCD, and I know Fish and Wildlife Service was on. Would any of our state agency partners like to do any reflections?
I'm gonna just put some stuff in the chat. That's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, we have one last slide as well. Wait, Jeff, were you about to say something? No? Okay.
Well, fine. It's after 5 that people are going to hate me. So, I'm coordinating the state's offshore wind roadmap, and one of the first questions people ask is, does the state need it? Do we need offshore wind power? And what I'm hearing from the energy strategy is that, well, based on the system we're looking at and the assumptions we're making, well, maybe not really, at least not for us. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen in Oregon. Maybe California is the customer. And so much of what the story for offshore wind for Oregon becomes relies on what California does and whether we're talking with them about it. And so I'm thinking about this, interstate, interregional coordination. Ruchi, like you made the same point, that for some of these bigger items where our stories are intertwined, it makes sense to stay together. But also I'm thinking, well, if California was the customer, wouldn't we still get something in the trade? And isn't that worth considering in our strategy as well? And also just thinking about what are those non-least cost benefits that we can get from some of these energy sources, and how is the strategy putting value on those things like energy resiliency and reliability, economic stimulus, job creation, those kinds of things. So lots percolating. I still believe in offshore data centers. I think there's a lot of power someday.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so thanks for sticking in here. There's one last slide if you want to put it up, I think. Slide 64. So I don't remember, Joni, if I'm doing this or you are, but I'll just do it since I'm talking. Here's your reminder for the comment period, and then the May 21st plenary meeting. Is there a slide after this? And then here's the sort of questions that we thought would be helpful to help focus your comments for the May 9th. So you'll see that we're really, I think, Patty, you asked this question too, like we're really focused on the policy actions here because that's what this group has been talking about. And that's what your sort of, charge was, to surface all these barriers and challenges and policy actions to address them. And so this is some more specific questions to maybe help you get to the level of details that we're really hoping to get more from you on. Well, thanks for staying with us 3 minutes after 5 here. Really appreciate you all being part of this policy working group, and looking forward to hearing from you more. Tony, do you want to have any last words?
Richie, can you send this out in a PDF form instead of a presentation form?
Yeah, I think we actually even have it on our website, so we'll put that in the follow-up email for you, for everybody.
Thank you very much. Great meeting.
Thank you. And Richie, I'll just echo, really appreciate all of you showing up for these meetings and participating in them to help us inform this process. It's these conversations are difficult sometimes, but really value your input.
Thanks all. Hope you have a nice evening. It's sunny here in Southeast Portland, so I'm going to go out and enjoy that soon. Take care. Bye.